Never thought I'd be the kind of man who'd kidnap another human being. I served 22 years in the Army, retired as a master sergeant, raised a daughter on my own after her mother passed, and never once raised my hand to anyone outside of combat. But when you walk into a basement and find your grandson the way I found mine, something inside you that you didn't even know existed wakes up. And it doesn't go back to sleep, not ever. My name's Russell Adair. I'm 58 years old, live just outside Knoxville, Tennessee, in a little 3-bedroom ranch I bought after I retired from Fort Campbell back in 2018. My daughter Carrie is my whole world. Always has been. She was 8 when her mother died of breast cancer, and I raised her the best a soldier knows how. Strict but soft when it counted. She turned out beautiful. Smart, got a nursing degree from UT Knoxville, worked night shifts at the Children's Hospital downtown, and 3 years ago she gave me a grandson named Bennett. 7 years old now. Looks just like his mama at that age. Same crooked smile. Same habit of tucking his bottom lip when he's thinking hard about something. Carrie got married 2 years back to a man named Trent Wexler. He works in commercial real estate, drives a leased BMW, wears those expensive sneakers that look like they cost more than my truck payment. I never liked him. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I did. He had this way of correcting Carrie in front of company. Real subtle, like a soft hand on her elbow when she said something he thought was wrong. He'd laugh it off. She'd laugh it off. But I saw it. I'd been a platoon sergeant long enough to spot a man who needed control the way other men need air. I told her once, careful as I could, that maybe she was moving too fast. She told me she loved him. She told me Bennett needed a father figure. What was I supposed to say to that? I'd been gone half her childhood on deployments. I didn't have much standing to question her about fathers, so I kept my mouth shut. Big mistake. The biggest one of my life. The whole thing started on a Wednesday in early August, hottest week we'd had all summer. Carrie called me on a Tuesday night, exhausted off a double shift, and asked if I could pick up Bennett from her place Friday morning and keep him through the weekend. She was driving up to a nursing conference in Lexington, would be back Monday afternoon, and Trent was supposed to watch Bennett but had some last-minute work trip to Nashville. Truth is, I don't think Trent ever wanted to be alone with that boy. He treated Bennett like a dog he hadn't asked for. Polite when Carrie was watching, cold when she wasn't. I told her, of course. Bennett and I had plans anyway. There was a model train show out at the fairgrounds, and the boy was crazy about trains. I'd ordered him a little engine off eBay just for the visit. Wednesday morning, my truck started overheating on the way back from the hardware store. Radiator hose finally gave out. I limped it home, called my buddy Eddie who runs a shop, and he said he could squeeze me in Thursday afternoon if I dropped it off in the morning. So Thursday morning at 6, I drove the truck to Eddie's and his nephew gave me a ride home. I figured I'd just drive Carrie's spare car to pick up Bennett the next day. Then around 2 in the afternoon, my phone rang. It was Linda, my next-door neighbor of 12 years, calling from her cell. She sounded shaken in a way I'd never heard from her before. Linda's 76, raised 4 kids, doesn't rattle easy. "Russell, honey," she said. "I don't want to overstep, and maybe it's nothing, but I was over at the Wexlers yesterday, dropping off that casserole dish your daughter borrowed, and I thought I heard something." My stomach dropped before she even said the next part. I thought I heard a child crying from inside the house, but Trent answered the door and said Bennett was at a friend's birthday party. He had me wait on the porch. I figured I was just hearing things, but Russell, I didn't sleep last night. It wouldn't get out of my head. That cry didn't sound like a happy boy. I asked her what time. She said around 4:30 Wednesday afternoon, about 2 hours after Carrie had left for Lexington. I told Linda, thank you, hung up, and stood in my kitchen with my hand still on the phone for what felt like a long time. I tried to talk myself out of it. Maybe Bennett had gotten dropped off early from a play date. Maybe Linda misheard. Maybe Trent really had taken him to that party. There were 10 reasonable explanations. But I'd been a soldier long enough to know the difference between possible and probable. I called Bennett's cell, the little prepaid one Carrie had bought him for emergencies. Straight to voicemail. I called Trent. He picked up on the 4th ring. There was traffic noise in the background. "Russell, hey. Make it quick. I'm just hitting the I-40 split." "You in Nashville?" "Heading there now. Why, what's up? Where's Bennett?" There was a half-second pause. Just a flicker. But it was there. "He's with the Hodges. Their boy Aiden had a sleepover thing. I figured it was easier than trying to drag him to Nashville with me. Which Hodges? Russell, I gotta go. I'm losing service in the tunnel. I'll text you the address when I park. He hung up. I stood there staring at my phone. He never texted. I called Carrie. She didn't answer, which made sense. She'd be in conference sessions all afternoon. I left her a voicemail saying nothing alarming, just to call me when she could. Then I grabbed the spare keys to her place that I'd had for 2 years, threw on a t-shirt, got in her old Civic, and drove the 18 minutes across town to their house in West Knoxville. Nice neighborhood. Brick colonials with pristine lawns. The kind of place where everybody minds their business. Trent's truck wasn't in the driveway. The garage door was down. I knocked on the front. Nothing. I tried the doorbell. Nothing. The Ring camera blinked at me red. I went around to the side gate and let myself in. The yard was quiet. A wasp was bumping against the kitchen window. Heat shimmer was coming off the patio bricks. I tried the back door, locked. Then I heard it. Not a cry. Not exactly. More like a thin, dry sound. Almost a whimper, but with no strength behind it. It was coming from the basement window wells along the side of the house. I dropped to my knees next to the first window well and pressed my face down to the glass. The window was painted black on the inside. I'd never seen that before. Carrie had finished that basement 2 years ago. Bennett's playroom, a guest area, a half bath. Big, bright windows. Now they were painted out from the inside. Bennett? I called. Buddy, can you hear me? Silence. Then, so faint I thought I'd imagined it. Pop? Butts, what he calls me. I have never moved that fast in my life. I went back to the patio, picked up one of the heavy concrete planters Carrie had bought at a garden center last spring, and I drove it through the basement sliding door. Glass exploded across the concrete patio. I climbed through. The basement was dark. The air was hot and stale and smelled like a kennel that hadn't been cleaned in a week. Urine. Sweat. Something sour underneath. I fumbled along the wall and found a light switch. Bennett was on the concrete floor in the back corner of what used to be his playroom. The toys, the little train table, the bookshelves, all of it pushed up against one wall like furniture in storage. The carpet had been ripped up. He was wearing the same Spider-Man t-shirt he'd had on Tuesday when I picked him up from school for ice cream. There was a 5-gallon bucket in the opposite corner with a piece of cardboard balanced on top of it. There was a plastic water bottle next to him, empty, the cap on the floor a few feet away. His lips were cracked white at the corners. His eyes were sunken in a way that made me think of pictures I'd seen from refugee camps. He didn't try to stand up. He just looked at me like he wasn't sure if I was real. Pop, he whispered. I knew you'd come. I told him you'd come. I went down on my knees and pulled him to my chest. He was so light. So light. 7 years old and he weighed nothing. He was burning hot. His skin was paper. How long, son? I asked him. I tried to keep my voice steady, but it came out wrecked. How long have you been down here? He thought about it the way kids do. Counting fingers in his head. He took me down on Wednesday, he said. After school. I asked for a snack and he said I was being greedy. He said greedy boys learn to wait. Wednesday. It was Thursday afternoon now. He'd been down there since Wednesday, almost 30 hours. In a Tennessee basement in August, in the dark, with one bottle of water. Bennett, did he hit you? He didn't answer. He just buried his face in my shoulder. That was answer enough. I carried him up the basement stairs and into the kitchen. I sat him on the counter and got him a glass of cold water from the fridge. He drank it so fast he started coughing and threw up a little down the front of his shirt. I got him another, slower this time. I made him sip. While he drank, I called 911 with shaking hands. I told them my name, the address, that my grandson had been locked in a basement and needed medical attention. The operator stayed on the line with me. I told her the stepfather was the one who did it, that he'd left the state, that the mother was at a conference out of state and didn't know. Where's the mother now, sir? Lexington, Kentucky. She's a nurse. She's at a conference. Has she been notified? Not yet. I'm calling her next. While I was talking, I noticed something on the kitchen counter near the toaster. A pet carrier. The little soft-sided one Carrie had bought when they got Bennett a guinea pig last Christmas. A fat little thing he'd named Captain Crunch. The carrier was sitting on the counter, the door zipped shut. I didn't want to look. I knew. I already knew. I unzipped it after the paramedics arrived. Captain Crunch was inside, dead. The water bottle in the cage was bone dry. There was no food. The little guinea pig was curled up in a corner the way Bennett had been curled up in the basement. I took a photograph of it on my phone. I don't know exactly why. Something told me I'd need it. The paramedics took Bennett to East Tennessee Children's Hospital. I rode in the ambulance with him, and I watched a nurse start an IV in the back of his small hand, and I watched the paramedic's face when he listened to my grandson's heart, and I watched my own hands shake on my knees, and I tried to remember how to breathe. I called Carrie from the hospital lobby. I told her to pull her car over before I said anything else. Then I told her. She screamed so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. She was on the road within 10 minutes. The ER doctor who saw Bennett was a young woman named Dr. Patel. She was maybe 35. She was very kind and very professional, and very, very quiet about what she found. Severe dehydration, heat exhaustion bordering on heat stroke, bruising across the upper back consistent with being struck with an open hand multiple times, older bruising on the ribs and upper arms in various stages of healing. She asked me to step outside while she did the rest of the examination. When she came out 40 minutes later, her eyes were wet, and she would not look at me directly when she said the words, Mr. Adair, this isn't the first time. I knew that already. Somewhere in the back of my head I had known it for months. The way Bennett had gotten quiet. The way he'd stopped wanting to come to my place because Trent said it wasn't fair to make him give up his weekends. The way Carrie had stopped sending me pictures. I had known, and I had let myself not know, because not knowing was easier. A detective named Calloway showed up around 8 that night. 30-something, sharp eyes, wedding ring. The kind of cop who actually listened. He took my statement. He took Linda's statement over the phone. He pulled the ring footage from Trent's own front door, which had been recording the whole time, and he found Trent walking in and out of that house Wednesday afternoon and Thursday morning when Bennett was supposed to be at a sleepover. He found Trent's truck on traffic cameras going to a Nashville hotel, but not until Thursday afternoon. He'd left Bennett alone in that basement Wednesday night. The whole night. Carrie arrived a little after midnight, wrecked and red-eyed. She walked into Bennett's hospital room and dropped to her knees by the bed, and she cried in a way I haven't heard a person cry since my wife was dying. Bennett woke up, saw her, and started crying too, but quiet, like he didn't have any volume left. Mama, he said. Mama, you came. Of course I came, she said. Of course I came, baby. Trent was arrested in his hotel room in Nashville at 2 a.m. Friday morning. They flew him back to Knox County the next day. He was charged with aggravated child abuse, aggravated child neglect, and animal cruelty under Tennessee Code. The DA's office in Knoxville moved fast. They had him in front of a judge by Monday afternoon for the bail hearing. I sat in that courtroom and watched a 36-year-old man in a borrowed suit cry on cue and tell a judge that he'd made a terrible mistake, that he was under work stress, that his marriage was struggling, that he loved Bennett like his own, that this was a one-time lapse in judgment. His attorney argued he had no prior record, no flight risk, deep ties to the community, was a respected commercial broker with a family-owned business that needed his attention. The judge set bail at $60,000. Trent's father wrote a check in the parking lot. He was out by supper time. Carrie filed for divorce that same week and filed for an order of protection covering both her and Bennett. The order said Trent could not come within 500 feet of either of them, could not contact them by any means, could not enter the marital home. The judge granted it, but there was nothing stopping him from existing in the same city. There was nothing stopping him from going back to his gym and his clients and his nice car and his life. The trial was set for 14 months out. 14 months. The DA told us up front they would push for a plea. 8 years was the high end. 3 to 5 was more realistic given no prior record. With good behavior, he might do 2 years for locking my 7-year-old grandson in a dark basement in August with 1 bottle of water and beating him in the ribs. The first night Bennett was back home with Carrie. She'd moved into my house, couldn't bear to be back in that one. He woke up screaming at 3 a.m. He didn't remember where he was. He thought he was still down there. Carrie sat on the floor of my guest room holding him until the sun came up. I sat in the hallway with my back against the wall, 58 years old, listening to my daughter try to piece her son back together, and something in me went cold. Not angry. Cold. I started thinking. I'm an engineer by training, Army Corps. I think in plans, in resources, in steps. I started laying out a plan the way I'd laid out 1,000 operations in my career. I told myself I wasn't going to do anything. I told myself I was just thinking it through to feel some control. That was the lie. I learned Trent's schedule. He'd gone right back to work like nothing had happened. He was selling commercial properties out of an office complex off Kingston Pike. He played pickup basketball Tuesday and Thursday nights at a gym near downtown. He had dinner with his parents every Sunday. He posted on his Instagram twice a week, gym selfies, his BMW, vague Bible verses about being persecuted. His followers ate it up. There were comments under every post from women calling him a good man, being railroaded by a vindictive ex. 3 weeks after the arrest, Trent posted a photograph of himself at a coffee shop downtown with the caption, "When God puts you through fire, he's making steel." 47 likes. I stared at that picture for a long time. I had a friend named Jerry who'd retired out of my old unit and lived on 40 acres up by Caryville, north of town. He owned a hunting cabin out there with a root cellar dug into the hill behind it. Concrete walls, 6 by 8. Single ventilation pipe to the surface, heavy wooden door with an exterior bolt. He used it for storing deer meat in the winter. The cabin was off-grid, no neighbors for 2 miles. Jerry was at his sister's place in Florida for the next month. He'd given me a key 3 years ago when I'd helped him with some plumbing. I borrowed a panel van from another buddy who runs a flooring business. Told him I needed it to haul some old appliances to the dump. He didn't ask questions. I disabled the GPS unit under the dash. I bought a prepaid phone with cash at a gas station outside Sevierville. I bought zip ties and duct tape and a stun gun online with that phone, paid for through a money order, shipped to a vacant address I'd scouted. On a Thursday night, 3 weeks and 4 days after I pulled my grandson out of that basement, I parked the van in the lot behind the gym where Trent played pickup ball. I waited. He came out at 9:48 p.m., gym bag over his shoulder, scrolling through his phone, laughing at something. Alone. I stepped out from between 2 SUVs. Trent. He looked up. His face went through 3 things in under a second. Recognition, fear, and then a kind of forced casualness. Russell. Hey, you know I'm not supposed to be talking to you. The order's for Carrie and Bennett. Same thing. Look, man, I know you're upset. I'm getting help. I'm seeing a counselor twice a week. I made a horrible mistake and get in the van. What? I showed him the stun gun. He didn't run. That surprised me. I think part of him knew this was coming. Or part of him thought he could talk his way out of anything. Russell, come on, man. You don't want to do this. I have a court date in. I hit him with the stun gun in the side of the neck. He went down hard between the SUVs. I dragged him into the van and zip-tied his wrists behind his back, his ankles together, and I put a strip of duct tape across his mouth. My hands were not shaking. I had imagined them shaking. They were not. I drove an hour and a half north to Jerry's land. I took back roads. I never broke a speed limit. I pulled up behind the cabin, opened the cellar door, and I dragged Trent down the 4 concrete steps. I cut the zip ties off his ankles so he could stand. I left his wrists tied. I tossed in a 5-gallon bucket, a piece of cardboard for a lid, 1 16-ounce bottle of water, half full. No food. The same supplies my grandson had. I shut the door. I dropped the bolt. 30 hours, I said through the heavy wood. That's how long Bennett was down there before I found him. That's how long you've got. Every hour, I'm going to come back and tell you what time it is, and I'm going to tell you what you did to him at that hour. And you're going to sit down there and you're going to think about it. The first 6 hours, he raged. He kicked the door. He threatened to kill me, to sue me, to ruin my daughter's life. He told me he had powerful friends. He told me he was on a custody-arranged visit and that this was a setup, and I'd go to prison. He told me my grandson was a liar and a manipulator, just like his mother. That last one was the one that almost made me open the door and end it differently. I didn't. At hour 8, I came back. Hour 8, I said. 8 hours in, Bennett wet himself because you wouldn't let him out to use a bathroom. He cried about it for an hour because he was embarrassed. He's 7 years old. Do you remember being 7 years old? Silence. At hour 14 I came back. He was quieter. Hour 14, I said. Bennett had finished his water. He kept rolling the empty bottle on the floor because the sound of it gave him something to focus on. He thought maybe somebody could hear it from upstairs. He thought maybe his mother would come home early. "Russell," he said through the door. His voice had gone hoarse. "Russell, please, I'm sorry. Tell Bennett I'm sorry. Tell him I was wrong. I'll go to prison. I'll plead guilty to everything. Please. There's no air down here, man. I can't." "There's air. There's a vent pipe to the surface. Same kind your basement had. Bennett had air too. He still has nightmares about not having any." At hour 20, I came back. He was begging now. Real begging. Not the manipulative kind. The animal kind. Hour 20, I said. Bennett was hallucinating. He told the doctor later that he'd seen his guinea pig down there with him at one point. Captain Crunch. You know what happened to Captain Crunch? You know what happened to the Captain Crunch, Trent? You left him on the kitchen counter. No water. He died in his carrier. That little animal trusted you and you killed him because you were too lazy to walk 20 feet to the basement door and put him with my grandson. I heard him crying then. Real crying. Not for show. At hour 26, I started recording. I brought a small audio recorder, the kind reporters use. I set it on the ground next to the cellar door's vent. I asked him questions through the door. Why did you do it? How many times had you done it before? What did you do to Bennett the other times? What did you do with the rest of the bruising the doctor found? He told me everything. He told me about a time in May when he'd left Bennett in a closet for 6 hours because Bennett had spilled juice. He told me about hitting Bennett in the ribs because the boy had wet the bed. He told me about a time he'd held Bennett's hand under hot tap water as punishment for taking a cookie. He told me he'd been doing it for over a year, escalating slowly, careful to leave bruises only where clothes covered them. He told me his own father had locked him in a closet for being gay when he was 13, and that he wasn't gay, but the closet had taught him discipline, and he'd thought it would teach Bennett the same. I let the recorder run. He confessed for almost 2 hours straight. By the end, he was talking like he was talking to a priest. At hour 30 exactly, I opened the door. He was sitting against the back wall. His hair was matted. His eyes were red. He'd soiled himself at some point. He couldn't stand up at first. The half bottle of water was empty. He hadn't even tried to ration it. I cut the zip ties. I helped him up the stairs. I gave him a bottle of water from the van. I drove him to a pilot truck stop on I-75 about 40 miles south of the cabin. I left him in the parking lot at a picnic table with a $20 bill and the clothes on his back. "You're going to walk into that store," I told him. "You're going to ask them to call the police. You're going to tell the police you don't know who took you or where you were. You're going to keep your mouth shut about my name forever. Or that audio recording goes to the DA's office, and to your mother, and to every contact in your phone, and to your church, and to your gym's clients. Do you understand?" He nodded. "Say it. I understand." I drove home. I returned the van to my buddy the next morning, vacuumed clean. I burned the prepaid phone in my fire pit along with the audio recorder's casing. I kept the SD card. Trent walked into the truck stop and asked them to call the police. He told them a story about being grabbed in the gym parking lot by a stranger in a mask. The police took it seriously for about a week. There was nothing to investigate. No DNA, no witnesses, no GPS trail. He couldn't even tell them what direction he'd been driven. He gave a description that matched 1,000 white men in their 50s. 2 weeks later, his attorney called the DA's office and said Trent was prepared to plead guilty to everything. No deal, maximum sentence. He just wanted it over with. The judge gave him 11 years in state prison. He's at Bledsoe County Correctional. He'll do at least 7 before any chance of parole. The other inmates know what he's in for. I'm told he stays in his cell as much as he can. Carrie doesn't know. I will never tell her. Not because I'm ashamed, I'm not, but because she has enough to carry without carrying that too. Bennett is in therapy with a child psychologist named Dr. Raina McAllister twice a week. He's doing better. He sleeps through the night most nights now. He came up to my place last weekend, and we worked on his model train layout in the basement. The basement we set up together, after his mother had me put new paint on the walls and bright LED lights in every corner. He talks to the trains while he runs them. He named the engineer Pop. Carrie testified in front of the Tennessee State Legislature 6 months later. She told Bennett's story. She talked about how the Department of Children's Services had been called by Bennett's school teacher 5 months before that August day, after a bruise had been spotted on his arm. She talked about how the investigation had been closed within 2 weeks because Trent had been polished and Carrie had been fooled and Bennett had been too scared to speak. The legislature passed a bill the following spring requiring DCS investigators to do unannounced follow-up visits within 90 days of any closed abuse investigation involving a child under 12. They named it Bennett's Law. My grandson's name is on a piece of state legislation now, and someday when he's grown, he'll be able to look it up and know his story changed something. I sit on my porch some nights, and I think about what I did. I think about that 30 hours. I think about the moment I dropped the bolt on that cellar door. I won't tell you, I don't think about it. I think about it most nights, actually. My therapist, yeah, I have one now after 22 years of telling soldiers under me they should see one, calls it moral injury. She says soldiers carry it, cops carry it, parents who've had to make impossible choices carry it. She says it doesn't go away, it just becomes part of you. Like a piece of shrapnel the surgeons decided was safer to leave in than dig out. I'm not going to tell anyone reading this to do what I did. I'm not even going to tell you it was right. Some nights I think it was. Some nights I think I'm no better than him. Most nights I land somewhere in between, and I figure that's the honest place to land. What I will tell you is this. If something feels wrong about a person near your child, it is wrong. It doesn't matter how nice their car is, or how good their Instagram looks, or how many people in the church pews vouch for them. Trust the part of you that's been quiet. Trust your old neighbor who hears something through a wall. Trust the teacher who sees a bruise. Trust the boy who's gotten too quiet at the dinner table. The system worked, eventually. 11 years. Bennett's Law. A confession that, even though it never got entered into evidence, made a guilty plea feel cleaner. The system worked because a neighbor made a phone call she almost didn't make, and because a grandfather drove across town in a borrowed car, and because a paramedic and a nurse and a detective and a prosecutor all did their jobs. But the system worked 28 hours late. 28 hours that Bennett will carry his whole life. 28 hours that put him in therapy at 7 years old. 28 hours that took something out of him that I don't know if he'll ever get all the way back. I went and got those 28 hours back from the man who took them. I traded a piece of myself for them. I'd do it again. Bennett came up to the house this past Sunday. He's 8 now. Birthday last month. He's tall for his age. He brought me a card he'd made in art class. On the front, he'd drawn a stick figure soldier in green with stripes on the sleeve, holding the hand of a smaller stick figure in a Spider-Man shirt. On the inside, in his careful second-grade handwriting, he'd written, "You came down the stairs and I knew everything was gonna be okay. Love, Bennett." I read it on my front porch. The cicadas were loud. The sun was setting orange behind the ridgeline. I read it 3 times. Then I put it in my Bible on the page in Proverbs where my wife had underlined verses 30 years ago, and I went inside to start dinner for my family. I've thought a lot about how this whole thing started, and I keep coming back to the same answer. It started the day I decided to stay quiet. Not the day Trent walked into my daughter's life. Not the day he closed that basement door on Bennett. The day I sat across from Carrie at her kitchen table and saw the way he corrected her, and I told myself it wasn't my place. That's the seed of every bad thing that grew after. Every cause has a quiet beginning. Every effect comes due eventually. I learned that the hard way, 28 hours too late. What I've come to understand, sitting on my porch in the evenings, is that protecting the people you love isn't a single act of bravery. It's 1,000 small acts of paying attention. It's asking the awkward question. It's making the phone call. It's telling your daughter the hard truth even when she doesn't want to hear it, because silence dressed up as politeness is just cowardice with better manners. I had 22 years of training in noticing details that could keep men alive, and I let myself ignore the details that mattered most because I was afraid of being the difficult father. There's no virtue in that kind of restraint. None at all. The other thing I've come to believe is that a strong man isn't the one who never breaks. He's the one who breaks in the right direction. Trent broke too. He broke into a man who locked a child in the dark because somebody had once locked him in the dark. He took his pain and pushed it downhill onto a smaller person, and that's the easiest thing in the world to do. The harder thing, the thing that takes real strength, is to stop the chain. To take what was done to you and refuse to pass it on. Bennett is going to have a choice someday about what to do with what was done to him. My job and Carrie's job is to make sure he knows he has that choice. That's the only thing that actually breaks the cycle. Not punishment, not even justice. The decision. Made one person at a time to set the weight down instead of handing it forward. I want anyone listening to this to take one thing from it. Trust the part of you that goes quiet when something's wrong. That quiet is not nothing. That quiet is your mind seeing what your eyes are too polite to see. Honor it. Act on it early. The price of acting too soon is an awkward conversation. The price of acting too late is the rest of your life carrying what you should have prevented. I know which one I'd choose now. I wish I'd known it then.